Hey, welcome back to the House of Trauma podcast. It is me, your favorite podcast host, Kiana Brienne. Now let's get into it. Okay, so I want to kind of pick up where we left off on last week's episode, A Moment of Honesty. In last week's episode, I gave you a homework assignment. And again, this homework assignment was just for you, kind of like an exercise to help, be honest with yourself, do some self-reflecting, feel some emotions, and maybe kind of pinpoint an area in your life where you may need to begin or continue healing. So the assignment was to write a letter to yourself apologizing for not being honest and explain why you haven't been honest. And this could have been about anything. And again, this letter is just for you. However, I want to share with you all the letter that I wrote to myself. Okay, and it'll kind of take us into this week. My letter says, Dear Kiana, I apologize for not being completely honest with you. It wasn't fair to you to bottle up all of my emotions and pretend like it didn't hurt. Sometimes, well, most times, it's easier to ignore the pain, ignore the problems. The truth is, my heart is broken in more ways than one. I'm so used to being the strong friend for everybody, I couldn't bear the thought of being vulnerable. I could not bear for 1 second anyone believing not only had I failed, but that I allowed someone to come in and mistreat me. And instead of walking away, I stayed. And I allowed another person's actions to turn me into someone I didn't recognize. Honestly, I'm just disappointed in myself because I let you down. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you or your heart. I'm sorry I didn't protect us. I'm sorry I didn't trust God to lead. I was living in silent shame and it prevented us from being able to heal. I promise to never again ignore the truth out of fear. I deserve better. You deserve better. We deserve better. With time and gentleness, we can fully heal a broken heart. And I can forgive myself. Love, Kiana. Whew. So that was a letter that I wrote to myself, and yours doesn't have to be that way. That's just kind of how I wrote it. It was like me talking to me. But yeah. And so I think it's important to just be honest with yourself in the areas of your life where you are hurting and to feel those emotions fully, because if you don't, you'll never be able to heal those emotions because you never fully acknowledge them. You know what I mean? And I think it's important to love yourself and to take care of yourself. So by definition, self-love is a regard for one's own well-being and happiness, not sacrificing your own well-being and happiness to please others. Self-care, the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health, taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness. So how do we kind of factor those two together? And I'm definitely like one of those people who believe that self-love is self-care. Self-care is self-love. Like I really feel like they go hand in hand as it pertains to your well-being and your happiness. I remember a few years ago, I was sitting in my car and my sister was there, my best friend was there, and my brother was there, and we were always kind of talking about like all these different things. We were going with relationships and things like that, and we had got on the topic of self-love, and my sister said that she was like, well, what is self-love though? I think it can be different for everybody. And I agree, but I do feel like it's a basis behind self-love, but how you choose to display or act on self-love as it pertains to you personally can look a little different. But I think the general synopsis is taking care of your happiness and your well-being, right? And so I feel like I wasn't always in a good mental space where I could take care of my well-being and my happiness in a healthy manner. And I just want to start from the beginning. I mean, way, way, way in the beginning of my time, okay? So I used to be ashamed to admit that when I was younger, I had low self-esteem and I lacked boundaries. And as we all know from the episode Finding My Voice, which was episode 13, that I had a hard time speaking up for myself when I was a kid, right? So somewhere along the lines, my voice, I felt, was considered invaluable, like in my life, within my household, like within my family. I talked a little bit about, how I didn't feel heard with my parents, or like my voice mattered. So as I got older, as time went on, I found myself in more and more situations where I felt like my voice wasn't being heard, to the point where I just wouldn't speak up at all, I wouldn't say at all, but I wouldn't always speak up when it was necessary. And which led to me not being able to set the proper boundaries within certain relationships in my life, whether it was friends, family, significant others. I didn't always set the proper boundaries. And if we can go into my childhood, I feel like my parents were, especially when I was younger, it was just so many kids, and this is not an excuse for them, but it really was a lot of us, and I feel like my parents did the best they could for what they knew at the time, but they were pretty harsh on us. And, speaking on me personally, I definitely felt like my parents were harsh in a lot of ways, in the ways that they spoke, in the ways that they acted or reacted to things I said or did, or in my times of need. I felt like there were moments where I would go to my parents, looking for genuine love and comfort, and it wasn't there. I didn't get those things. And as we know, our parents are our first introduction to love, to the world. And so in a lot of cases, when you're not feeling heard from your parents, when you're not feeling loved from your parents, it reflects negatively in relationships that you build outside of the home. And so that was one of my issues. In episode 21, 53206, I talked about a little bit about how we grew up poor. Like I grew up below the poverty line, and I didn't know it at first, but the older I got, the more evident it got, and it didn't just become clear to me that I was poor because I just was older and more conscious about money. There were things, basic necessities that we just didn't have, and it was devastating for a young child, for a young teenager, to realize that, some of my basic needs aren't being met. And it led to anger, and it stunted my self-worth, which contributed to my low self-esteem, because I always felt like I had less than everybody around me. And when you're young and you're a kid and you're impressionable and your mind is like a sponge, you feel left out when you can't do things. Like there were a lot of things I couldn't do when I was growing up. There were a lot of things that I couldn't experience when I was growing up. There were a lot of things I didn't have when I was growing up. And that was devastating. Me and my sister, I remember we were on the phone one day and it turned into tears. But we were crying about, there was an incident in middle school where we couldn't even afford deodorant. Like, how fucked up is that? And this isn't something that we can control. We're not old enough to work. We don't have money. But something as simple as deodorant is not at our disposal at a certain period of time. So imagine how that reflects on somebody. And kids are harsh. I say this all the time. Kids are harsh, and it doesn't matter the age group of these children. Things like not having basic necessities, like I can't go out with my friends because I don't have money, or I don't have a ride, or, I can't go out on field trips because my mom couldn't afford to pay for this kid, and that kid. So it became a point in time where I wanted to lean into the background because I wasn't confident, because I didn't feel like I didn't have everything I needed at my disposal to be comfortable to go out into the world and display the confidence necessary. And there was no one around me telling me that I was beautiful and that I was amazing and that I could do anything and be anything in this world. I mean, there was nobody telling me I was ugly either, but I feel like, again, when you're young and impressionable, you need those words of confirmation to help aid you and build you up as we are growing and navigating our way through this cold, cruel world. I talked a lot in, what episode is that? Episode 7, Starvation Nation, that I battled my weight for most of my life. And my dad was a big contributor in me not feeling comfortable even in the clothes I wore because I was perceived as being overweight. But if you look back at all my pictures, I was very much not overweight. Okay. In every single phase in my life, I reflected that of somebody who was also my age and my size. So there were just a lot of things I talked about in the For Color Girls episode, my struggle with colorism and how me and my sister were so close in age and we were constantly being compared to each other. And I was always the dark-skinned one. Oh, I was pretty for a dark-skinned girl, or, oh my God, no, not the dark-skinned girl. So there were a lot of negative things coming at me when I was younger that aided in my low self-esteem. I suffered through years of verbal, emotional, sexual abuse at a very young age. And these were also very strong contributing factors to my low self-esteem. I remember the first time I went to therapy. It was my freshman year in college. And I was talking with the counselor, and I was talking about everything. The childhood abuse, how I struggled with my eating disorders. And, as our sessions progressed, ultimately how I kind of overcame those things. And I started to rebuild my confidence at 18 years old. And I remember she asked me, well, how did you overcome that? Because it kind of sounds like you did it all on your own. And I told her that a large factor was Lady Gaga. And it might sound crazy, but at that point in my life, it was the absolute truth. So in 2012, I believe, Lady Gaga came out with her Born This Way album. And I remember she had a lot of backlash for it. And a lot of the songs were controversial. People felt like she was just telling people, oh, yeah, go be gay. It's okay to be gay. Like, I mean, honestly, do whatever you want. But that wasn't the point of it. It quite literally goes, I'm beautiful in my way because God makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby. I was born this way. And I used to listen to that song on repeat. I used to listen to the whole album on repeat. And it just felt so liberating for me because at that point in my life, I was only 17 years old. And I very much felt like a rebel because I was sick and tired of the bullshit at home, quite frankly. And I just felt like such a black sheep and such an outcast and just so misunderstood. And to have music that made me feel like, wow, there's somebody else out there. There are other people out there who are just as misunderstood as me, but I don't have to feel bad about it. I don't have to feel bad about who I am or how I look. I was born this way. God made no mistakes. I was made in the image of God, and I should be glad about that. I should be happy. And that album got me through some of my darkest days. And I essentially, I let my therapist know that. And she said, wow, that's remarkable. You were able to do that all on your own. And I remember sitting there for a second and I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. I did kind of do that on my own. And it wasn't easy for a 17-year-old, 18-year-old girl who had no positive representation for what it's like to heal, to be healed, and to be loved in her life. To be able to pick myself up off the floor and realize that I was better than this. When you suffer abuse of any kind, a result is you lose your self-worth and you start to ask questions like, why did this happen to me? Could I have done something differently? Am I being punished? Was I the one in the wrong? You really start to wonder if you're actually worthy of love. I used to write poems, and I still have these poems. These poems date as far back as 2007, I believe, or 2006, but I really think it's 2007. And so I was in 7th grade, and poetry used to be the way I would express myself because I couldn't do it verbally. And I would just pour my heart out in these poems, and I would just, write about how sad I was or how mad I was or how miserable, I was. And sometimes when I read them back now, I'm like, wow, I was so young, yet going through so much. And while I think poetry is a beautiful thing, it's bittersweet because I couldn't go to my parents and express these feelings. I couldn't, at a young age, seek therapy, seek counseling, to work through my emotions. And so I realized a pattern since as far back as I can remember. I've been having to do the hard work, the healing myself. And I didn't realize back then that this was really my first introduction to trying to heal my emotional wounds. I just really didn't have all the tools or know what it was that I was doing back then, but I was fighting demons and I was fighting depression and I was fighting low self-worth. And I really felt all alone in this battle. And then I did it again when I was 18. And then I did it again when I was 25. And it just goes to show that this is a continuous journey. And there will be times in our lives where we backslide, where we fall back into a dark space. And it's important for you to continuously pick yourself up. And I remember my family being so judgmental to me and my sister, my Irish twin. It was always judgy, what we wore, who we hung out with, what it looked like we were doing, what they assumed we were doing. And it just wasn't real encouraging. And I actually had this conversation with my youngest sister the other day. And I'm like, these people, they present themselves to be, women of God, men of God, these holier than thou Christians. And they judge you when y'all all had kids at 14 and 15 years old. And though we've surpassed that age, we're still being judged. I cannot tell you how many times we were accused of being potential teen mothers. And here I am, 29 years old, without so much as a pregnancy scare. And I just always kind of felt like they made it seem as though we were less than or we weren't living up to their standards. And, when you're constantly being told something, you start to believe it. Because how am I to believe otherwise? There's nobody disputing what it is that you're saying. And as I got older and I grew older and I became an adult and I was able to, be more independent, I never wanted anyone to feel the way that I felt. And even to this day, I never want anyone to feel lost or alone or unloved or, misunderstood or judged negatively by the people who should love you the most. And so I developed a bad habit of, laying my life on the line for everybody I loved because I felt like they deserved it, even when they didn't. And that behavior wasn't always reciprocated. However, I would literally give my last dime on many occasions to make sure that my siblings were straight, to make sure that my friends were straight, to make sure that anybody that I truly cared about was good, and to my own detriment. Because once I was able to break free from my parents, and once I was able to start to heal at least a portion of my emotional wounds, I realized that, certain situations were really fucked up. And again, I would never want anybody that I love to experience that kind of pain. So I overcompensated. And I remember my dad used to be like, you can't help nobody till you help yourself. You can't help nobody till you help yourself. Like, your big heart gonna be your downfall. And he didn't say it exactly like that, but essentially that's what he was saying. And even one of my younger sisters told me one day, people keep asking you for stuff, keep wanting you to do stuff because you keep doing it. And I had a hard time saying no and setting those boundaries like I mentioned before. Because again, I didn't want anyone to feel the way I did. There were times in my life where I really needed somebody and nobody was there. So I felt like that if somebody really needed me, that I had to be there, even if it was hurting me to be there for them. I became kind of like a dumping ground for other people's trauma. Yeah, y'all heard of trauma dumping? Absolutely was that. And I'm such a sensitive person, and I'm so sensitive to energy that when you dump your trauma on me, when you bring your problems to me, it weighs heavy on me energetically in a way that I don't even know that I can describe, but I literally feel like I'm carrying the weight. People say carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. Like, that's what it literally feels like. The weight of all your problems, the weight of everybody's problems is resting on my back and my neck, and I'm just carrying that around, whether I want to or not, because I feel like, okay, if I don't carry around your trauma, then who else is going to do it? And I don't want anybody to ever feel alone, because I know what that feels like, and it doesn't feel good. And it wasn't just my friends and family that I was carrying the weight of the world. It was my job. I had a problem saying no. And I think that my boss, as much as she looked out for me, she also knew that about me. That she could ask me to do almost anything, because 9 times out of 10, I'm going to say, yeah, I'll do it, because I don't want to disappoint. Because I spent years feeling like a disappointment to my parents. And I'll never forget when my mom told me she was proud of me. And I never heard her say that before. I was well into my 20s before I remember her ever saying that to me, and it took me by surprise. It made me happy, but it also made me emotional, because I fought my whole life for my parents' approval, and I felt like I very rarely got that. It was always something wrong. It was always something that could have been done better. It was always more that I could have done to satisfy them. Do y'all know how that feels? To do everything right, yet everything wrong at the same time. I remember one day I was walking through the mall, and I was with someone else, and I was complaining about, I've been complaining for days, really. I was just like, wow, my back hurt, my neck hurt, and it just really came out of nowhere, but the pain was just constant, and I don't take medicine. Yeah, I said it. I don't take medicine. I got to be practically on my deathbed to take even a Tylenol. But there was just kind of like a little, how like they had like the little setups where they be giving like massages in the mall. So he was like, oh, just stop right here, get this massage. I'm like, I ain't getting no massage in the middle of the mall. Who I look like? They like, oh no, I'll pay for it. Just do like a quick little 15-minute, massage. They can just do your neck and, the top of your back. So I did it, and I remember the man, he's just like, oh my God, you're really tense. And he's like, are you stressed? It was like, oh yeah, she's stressed, all right. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm just stressed. There's a lot going on with my family, but it's fine. This man literally said, I can't do this. I kid y'all not. If I'm lying, I'm flying. He said it was too much. I was too tense. The knots in my back were too big. He walked away and went to go get somebody else. And him and the man was sitting there talking for a while. And the other man came, and he's just literally like, whatever. He's working kinks out. He's telling me whatever it is that's stressing you out, let it go. He's literally telling me, look, we having a therapy session while I'm getting a $20 massage in the middle of the mall. And he's just like, whatever you're carrying, it's too much. And he was right. I'm carrying the weight of 10 other people's problems on top of my own fucking problems. I'm barely sleeping. I'm emotionally eating. It was a lot. And I think that was, an eye-opening experience for me where I had to start taking a step back. And now I'm at a place where, like, if I know that what I'm about to tell you is about to be heavy and could potentially be too much, out of respect, and I, expect the same thing in return, out of respect, I will ask people, are you emotionally able right now to listen to my bullshit? And I say it just like that. And I'm like, and feel free to say no. And typically the person that I'm talking to says yes, but I gave you fair warning that I'm about to get into some BS. And I just feel like that's only fair. Like, don't dump your trauma on other people and not understand. Sometimes you just need to vent. You need advice. You want to get something off your chest. But we have to be mindful that people are carrying burdens of their own. But also, you have to be mindful that you cannot accept everybody's problems. I didn't realize that because, again, I had no limit for boundaries. I was battling low self-worth. I still hadn't really found my voice. Okay. And I was willing to accept everybody's problems because I felt like I could save the world. I felt like I could save the world because I was really fighting for little me, who was in 7th grade, writing poems about being unhappy, being sad, and dreaming of a life outside of the life that I was living. And that's why I tell people I always knew I do great things in this world, because no matter how bad things got, I refused to believe that this is what God had for me. I knew that there were great things out in the world, whether I could see them or not. And I promised little me that I would fight to have those things that I could only dream of. It takes a lot of hard work to dig yourself out of a dark place, especially alone. But I'm a living testimony that it is possible. And I intend on continuously keeping the promise to little me to give myself all the things in the world that I dreamed of. But it comes with a lot of hard work. It comes with a lot of pain and a lot of tears. And because I'm dedicated to keeping that promise to myself, I had to be honest with myself that I had stopped doing the work necessary to continue to progress and to grow and to heal those emotional wounds. And as we all know, because I talked about it in last week's episode, A Moment of Honesty, I had stopped doing that work for a while. I was only pretending. But it doesn't matter if you pretend. Real is real. Truth is truth. And you can lie to yourself, but not for long. And I don't want to lie to myself. I want the stories that I tell to be the real testimony of my life. I want to live free of emotional burden, not just pretend to live free. Here I am now in present day on this self-love healing journey, still trying to navigate and work my way through. But it does come with a lot of trial and error, and I think one day I literally I decided I deserved all the best things in life and that I was going to have them no matter what. And if it's within God's will, then I will have it. Because the truth is, God wants us to live this life in abundance. He doesn't want us in pain or sorrow or humiliation. I know that I was placed here on earth at this exact moment in history to do a great works in God's kingdom on earth. And I don't think that the work that I'm doing would be effective if I'm living in a lie and if I'm not coming from a whole place. And if you're in an unhealed energy, if you're avoiding problems, then you aren't fully whole, in my opinion. I have my Bible here and I want to read a scripture, Psalms 139, verse 14. I will praise you because I have been remarkably and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know this well. And that is in the Holman Christian Standard Bible version. It's crazy because I looked back to even the darkest moments in my history, and I can still see the presence of God protecting me, guiding me. And I don't believe that there's anything I've had to endure in this lifetime that did not have meaning behind it. Take it from me, because trust, if you ain't figured it out yet, I know a little something about being in dark places and being able to pick myself up out of them. First and foremost, you have to lean on God. And there were many times where I was in dark places and I sat there and endured that darkness without calling on the voice of God. And God was still there. But it would have done me a whole lot better. It would have been a little more bearable had I leaned on God fully for his strength. The biggest battle you will fight in this lifetime is control over your mind. You cannot ever let the negative thoughts win. The very first thing I felt like I had to learn how to do when I started my spiritual journey / my self-love healing journey, is learn how to control my mind. And that's when I started to meditate. And some people think that meditation is not important. And I say, this is just me. I'm no expert. Okay. I'm not a professional. I'm not speaking as a professional on this matter. But in my opinion, I say that any work that you do, any shadow work, spiritual work, healing work that you do is nothing if you don't seal it in with meditation. You need a moment to rein your mind in, to process your thoughts. Sometimes you just really have to sit down and shut up. And also, it's just important to let your mind rest outside of sleep. Just be present in the moment. And it took me some time to learn these things and not just learn them, to apply these things. And even now, I'm not perfect with them. I'm honest about not being perfect in this walk and on this journey, but it's still important to begin to do the hard work and try your hardest to be consistent. And I'm not just talking to y'all, I'm talking to myself as well, because it's going to be hard. It's going to be a challenge, but it's so worth it in the end. Because had I not dedicated time to healing, I wouldn't be in the space I am now. I spoke a lot about, my experiences growing up and why that led to me being in a bad space and being in a dark space. But outside of me, working on healing my heart and, not being honest about my last relationship. Outside of that, if we completely factor that out, the place I am in life right now, you can't tell me shit. Because I look back to when I had no self-worth and I wasn't showing myself self-love. I did not implement my daily, weekly, monthly self-care routines, and I look myself in the mirror every day and I'm just like, who do I love more than me? And 15 years ago, this would not have been a conversation. 15 years ago, every time I looked in the mirror, I wanted to throw up my food. And honestly, I would be lying if I didn't say that in the past few months, because I had gained, I actually have gained a lot of weight. And sometimes I'm just like, I'm thinking back to that time, but because I've been able to train my mind and I now know that there are healthier ways of dealing with my weight gain. I know how to implement healthy practices and, change my eating habits. I know that it's important to be active, and I know that my body deserves more than throwing my food up in the toilet. Like, that was really hard on my body. And it wasn't just hard on my body physically, it was hard on my body mentally. But because I love myself, I'm able to take a healthier approach to issues that I see that I don't like. And I don't have to resort to drastic, unhealthy, and really traumatic measures in order to achieve the results I personally deem more desirable for myself. Because now I'm living for me, and I just want to be happy for me. I don't want it to look like I'm happy. I don't want it to appear like I'm happy. I don't want other people to be happy with what it is that I'm doing, the actions that I'm taking, or the way that I'm looking. Because I find my self-worth from within and how I feel about myself. And can I look myself in the mirror every day and be proud of who I am? Be proud of the decisions I made. Be proud of the actions I took. Be proud of the way that I handled a difficult situation. That's what I look to now. And I'm just so proud that I can now live comfortable in my own skin. And that's why I hate when people, I just despise when people hate me for loving me, because it took me a lot to get here. It took a lot of long nights to be in this space mentally, to be comfortable, to be confident, to love myself. And I'm just living my life. I don't care what you think about me. So why do you care what I think about me? You got to ask yourself. I'm no longer settling for the bare minimum, not in friendships, not in relationships, not in work situations. I'm not even settling for the bare minimum on food. Okay. And I am not kidding. Some people will just go to a restaurant and have people, or let them bring their food out any kind of way, and will not speak up. And in an effort to exercise my throat chakra, I'm not doing that. I'm speaking up in every area, every chance I get, and I am setting healthy boundaries. And most importantly, I am loving myself through and through, flaws and all. The reason we seek external validation and approval is to fill a void. And it's a clear sign that we need healing to our wounded inner child. For years, I had a relentless dedication to others, but a persistent commitment to ignoring my own needs, not even realizing that my inner child was really crying out for help. I now know truly that when you demand better, you get better. And every time you interact with somebody, you're showing them how to treat you, what you will and will not allow. The younger, wounded version of me would allow a lot. But the present version of me, the version of me that is filled with love and joy and God's Holy Spirit, refuses to accept anything less than what I know I'm truly deserving of. So to anyone who is truly struggling and fighting this battle to show self-care through self-love, I encourage you to be gentle with yourself. This healing journey is far from easy, and it's a never-ending road. But please don't stop now, because just like me, your inner child is waiting for you to fulfill those promises you made long ago. My name is Kiana Brianne. This is the House of Trauma podcast. I'll see you next week.